Reality is an idea, and all ideas are resting on language. Language is the sound of an idea. And it's also the shape of an idea, because if we call this a round tan thing, we emphasize and focus on and define reality differently than if we call this thing a white person's arm, or if we call it a increasing number of curves, because see, this one's curving a little bit more, a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, and this one's off to the side. So we could call this an increasing number of curves, where the curve just intensifies as you go around. And we could also call it a gradient temperature if we were to use a heat spectrometer and measure which parts were hotter. We would see some parts are hotter than others. So we could call it a gradient of temperature. We could also call it a small piece of planet Earth. And we could also call it a small piece of the Big Bang. We could also call it part of the time continuum. And that's all within the framework of our language. But what about all of the things that this is that don't have words in our language? And even if they have words in our language that we could kind of gesture, kind of lean into what we're referencing, that it doesn't occur to us because within the paradigms that we're using, those things just don't come up. Now, I call this my hand. Now, the my defines polarity, because as soon as there's a mine, then there's a yours, and there's everything else. And so we're instantly entering the paradigm of the I-dentity, otherwise known as the ego, the I-dentity, the one that says this is me and this is not me. And so we're immediately entering the terrain that violates or that opposes a certain amount of science, because every scientist can trace a billion different ways that everything that I say is me is interconnected with the entire fabric of all that will be, has been, is. In the entirety of the universe, there is a connection between every particle, every energy formation, and every other energy formation in an ongoing process. And so we're dealing a lot with language. And what I want to look at is a geometric expression of some of the different systems in play that we build with language to create reality with distinctions, with words. Now, all reality begins with the circle. The circle is the great paradox of masculine and feminine energy. It is both one and infinite simultaneously. So we begin with the circle more expansively with the sphere, but we're going to draw two circles. Now the question is, how does one relate to the fact that there is value and reality in different philosophical systems? So your system says that Jesus did this and did this. Your system says this. It's very similar to the dynamic with Apple and Microsoft. If you plug in a piece of software to a Microsoft operating system that was designed to run on Microsoft, you get a successful outcome if you want the outcome that software provides. If you put the same software into an Apple system, you get nothing. You don't even get, you might get an error message. This is not designed for this system. And, you know, work well over here. Why doesn't it work over here? If my system of engaging is to be effusive, hey, how are you? Come on, you know, how's it going? If that's my system and it works in this cult with this person, why is it when I go over to Japan and enter a Zen monastery that this doesn't get the desired result? It doesn't get the energy flowing. Hey, how are you? Slap the monk on the shoulder and am escorted out of the temple, if the monk even understood what I was talking about, because I'm not using the language, the system, to connect with that operating system. Now, you can look at a Zen monk and recognize the fact that they've got a tremendous talent at doing certain things that I cannot do. And one could look at me and say that I have a tremendous talent to do certain things that the monk cannot do. And so it doesn't necessarily make sense to throw out the Zen monk paradigm entirely, to say, you know, that's just weird, it should be gotten rid of, you know, the destruction of diversity and complexity. But if that's good and I'm good, like, what do we do here? You know, your system helps you over here, your system helps you over there. How do we sort out what's going on with systems? And is there a true system? Is there a true system? You know, I want the real deal. I want the system that's the real system. And let's look first of all about the gradient continuum in the hierarchy of systems. So understanding that reality is spherical, the first thing that we want to evaluate a system with is its symmetry. How do you do that? Well, you just you find the center. You find the center. What's the center of the system? Now, in any intelligent system or highly intelligent system, the center of the system is sustainable well-being, is sustainable evolution, is a movement towards conscious, sustainable fun, conscious, sustainable success. It's a movement towards these things. And so if that's what you find in the center, a movement towards, there are no perfect systems. And so what we're looking at is the direction, a movement towards these things. If that's what we find in the center, we can say that that's a better system than if what we find in the system is a movement towards, unsustainable suffering or even sustainable suffering, just increased volatility, incoherence, etc. And so that's what we're moving towards. Now, the other thing that's important in the relationship with reality is to transit through the geography of reality. Now, reality, we're looking at reality through the metaphor of the system. So we're really transiting reality through navigating the full extent of our metaphor. And so we look at symmetry. Now, if we break symmetry into 4 points, we could say, does it have an up and a down, and does it emphasize the up and the down equally? Does it have a left and a right and emphasize the left and the right equally? Okay, so we've got symmetry. And let's assume we at least have a 4-point system. So you have the one, if you imagine this as an infinite interconnected ecological sphere as one body. I mean, just look at the human body. You can take the kidney out and you can take the heart out and you can say, and this is separate and this is separate and this is separate and this is separate. But it doesn't work that well, does it? I mean, if you just remove the lungs and leave the rest of the body doesn't work very well. So we could just as easily look at the body as one interconnected system. And if you remove one bit, it affects the entirety. And if you remove certain bits, there is no entire system of body. It becomes an entire system of bacteria as the body reintegrates with what? A larger system of energy. And so, over here, we've divided things in squares. But what about over here? What if we divided the system like this? Well, is it sustainable? Is it symmetrical? Does it emphasize the one side versus the other side? Yes, it does that. But it has what? More distinctions. It is more complex. Now, do you want a complex system or a simple system? Well, that depends on the complexity of your consciousness. Because if your consciousness is in polarity, and you just say, I just want to know. I don't want to talk. I just want to know. Do I turn right or do I turn left? That's all I want to know. I want the good system, of course, to tell me. Just tell me, right or left. Well, you're in a binary system, and you get to the next point. It's like, just tell me what to do. Do this or this. Keep it simple. Now, if you are a simple person, meaning your version of reality is black and white, well, you need a simple system to navigate through your simple reality. Because if you give such a person a 200-point system and say, you're at 189 and you're moving to 190, like, what's that? And what was 176? And I forgot this. And they're lost. They're lost in language. They're lost in the complexity of the system. Well, it's not very good. So you want someone to turn right or turn left. I see. Okay. And you need someone to tell you to turn left or right? Because I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to respond, meaning my identity, the one that I call me, doesn't want to respond, doesn't want to be the one accountable, may be able to respond, but is not very willing to respond, or may be willing to respond, but doesn't know how. Put this ego, this identity, into a jet fighter plane and say, quick, take off. And they're willing, they'll press the buttons. It's just that they don't know how to get the plane to do anything other than crash into the hangar. And so there's willingness, but there's no ability. There's ability, but I don't want it. Or there's no ability or willingness. And so in this system, I want someone who has ability and willingness to tell me what to do. That's my system, is to find someone who looks confident and tell them to tell me what to do, or just copy them. That's my system. Now, because we're constructing reality through the metaphor of language, the metaphor of system, the systems we end up with, first of all, they're not going to be perfect. Secondly, they will contain our biases. If we have a bias for the right way of doing things, well, then the left side gets, neglected. And so, we're going to develop, the part of our system, in that area. So that's, that's understandable. But, you're hearing this system and you're hearing this system. Which system should you believe? Well, what does it mean to believe? It means to make it your own to a certain extent. If you believe something, you accept and you import, basically, the language and the distinctions and the awareness that come with those language and distinctions into your identity. You take it into I. Now you say it's my belief. It is just a belief. It's one of many. But it's mine because I've put it in, I've imported it, into my operating system. I hold this belief. And if you want to export it, you have to delete the belief. And now it is still a belief. It's just not my belief. It's a belief. And of course, every belief was useful to somebody at some point in time. Every belief was useful to somebody at some point in time. That's why they created the belief. Maybe the belief was a guide. Maybe the belief was a reflection of some part of reality created in the consciousness of one system. So the benefit of simplicity is clear. If someone has a simple consciousness, i.e. black and white consciousness rather than a full spectrum consciousness, and there are 256 million colors that one computer chip will generate alone. And so we all have, relatively speaking, simple consciousnesses. And we all, relatively speaking, have complex consciousness. It's all on a continuum. And so the complexity of your system should be as complex as it can be without you getting lost and without it having no meaning. If left and right, black and white has real meaning for you, but, a 200-point number system, it's just words, you can find these if you start, reading, whether it's channeled work or whatever, you start exploring the different hierarchies of the heavens, the ninth heaven with the, this and that and the other, and this is the deity of the ninth heaven. And it's like, that means nothing to me. There's a heaven. Okay, I can get that. Okay, so if that's the simplicity of my my one direction, then there's a hell. And okay, so there's heaven and there's hell, and there's a gate. 10 gates? No, what's I don't want to. Which no. There's a gate. There's a dude. This guy's guarding the gate. Okay, I can hold that one. So what are they guarding for? And so, the purpose of a system is to consciously, because words create consciousness. If you want to be conscious, you have to think something. You have to think that you're aware of something. You have to do that if you want to be conscious. And the way that you think is with words. Just try it. Think a single thought without words. Try and think a single thought in Japanese if you do not know Japanese. If you know Japanese, try and think a single thought in some language you don't know. Try and think a thought in a language you don't know. And then try and think a thought without words in English. And there's obviously an awareness, but you're the I in identity. The I is not aware of that awareness without language. And so you need language. So language is what you use to construct your system. And it's how you're aware of awareness. It's how you're aware of reality. So you can look at the circular cycle of the breath, of the days, of the years, of the tides. There's a circular cycle. There's a movement. In energy, it's a vibration. 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 There's a frequency of movement. There's a circle. Protons and electrons in an atom creating a pattern, creating a breath. And there's a fractal expression of that circle. It's circles within circles within circles within circles within circles. And so we have this pattern, and then we have deviations from the pattern to, there would be no recognition of a sphere or circle without that. So if we understand that the circle is life, if you think of breath, if you stop exhaling and just inhale, you die. And if you stop inhaling, if you stop either one, you die. And so the purpose of a system is to transit the circle. You want to start at the beginning, and go all the way around, and end here, and then go all the way around again, which we see a lot of spiral patterns in life. So, and we're moving towards the center. And what's the center? It's the point of grace. It's the point of balance. So a good system will take you through the full revolution. A good engine, you want to drive your car. If the tire only goes around 180 degrees and then freezes, it's not a good system for transportation. If the tire or anything else only goes around to this degree or that degree, then it's not a good system. And the same is true with any other part of a system. Now, that's what we want in a good system, but everyone's going to do it differently. So you can get crudely around the circle with a square. You can get crudely around the circle with a triangle. We're back to how complex of a system can you hold? How symmetrical is the system? How balanced is the system? And does the system facilitate life, the movement towards conscious, sustainable success, the movement towards conscious, sustainable fun? Does it facilitate that? If it facilitates that for you, it's a good system. And it's important to be aware that mixing and matching doesn't always work. Because it's not that all systems are not illusionary, they're not real. You take away the language, they cease to exist. They're a technology of consciousness. But if you try and intersect this system with this system, you can see that there's some overlap in the six-pointed star and the square system. There's some overlap, but these little points out here and here don't fit in the system. And then the question is, what do you do with them? These distinctions, these awarenesses, these steps, these parts of the cycle. What do you do with the things that don't fit in the system? And it's one of the reasons why it's generally a good idea to pick a system, not because it's real, not because it's true, but because it navigates you as gracefully as you can go through the sphere, through the circle. And because the software written for that operating system fits that system. That's why. Because when you mix and match too many systems in too many ways, you don't have a system. You have chaos, you have dissociation, you have dysfunction, you have death, you have failure. Try and put a Porsche part on a Volkswagen tire, on a BMW body, with a house solar battery, and they're all good parts, and they all have good systems. They just don't relate to one another. And so part of the challenge as a consciousness that is creating renditions of reality through language is finding ways to relate to more and more of what is and more of the systems that are out there without becoming dysfunctional, without becoming so limited that we can't connect with this person, with this person, with that person, with that person, with this culture, with that, with this, that. We just can't connect with any of it, or we can connect with this one little thing. To expand the complexity, in a sense, the technology of assessing and bringing different systems together so that we can receive the value of a system, the grace, the benefits of the system, without becoming insane, without becoming so dissociative that it's the equivalent of loading a perfectly good piece of software into an incompatible operating system, and millions of hours of work over time just doesn't connect.